Good afternoon. It's Wednesday afternoon. This is episode number 69. I think we should say something either perverse or astrological. Danny's here. I'm Emily. Here we go. What's going on?
Hi.
That's about as calm and muted as you'll ever get, Danny.
Don't limit me. I don't know where to start. I realized today, after the whole YouTube strike fuckery and then a few things, it just reminded me that Mercury is about to go retrograde and Mars is retrograde. So I feel like I will bring in the astrological. I don't know how it relates to the 69. I'll leave the perverse bit to you, but that's what's up for me.
Well, I think it doesn't just the Cancer symbol look like a 69?
Yes.
And I'm a Cancer.
You dirty girl.
Hey, so I think we just covered the astrological and the perverse. So there we go.
See you on the patrons.
Bye. And that's about how our shows are going to be going forward. I know, I'm just kidding. All right, my microphone is doing something weird. Let me see if I don't love this at all. This scenario with the microphone irritates me to no end. Right? Let's see if I can get it.
Do you want to pause it, Em?
Yeah, I'm going to pause it. Okay, sorry about that. Mic situation solved for now. Anywho, okay, so we have changes that are coming. They're not finalized yet, so we're going to put off saying too much about them, but change is afoot. But we have one announcement that we would like to make, and I think we should make it off the bat, that we are searching for someone to help us as a producer. And what we are looking for is someone who can run live streams, recordings, production, editing, if necessary, somebody that has experience. And if that is you and you would like to help us, and we will work out what all of that would mean and entail or whatnot, please shoot us an email. My email is in the description below. And with it, send us an example of your work. And are we looking for anything else, Danny? Oh, also, if somebody, and it could be a different person or the same person, is good with social media, algorithms, and search engine optimization, you may be interested in that as well. So hit us up. Anything to add?
Well done, Emily. Very clear.
Awesome. And now on with the show. All right. So I have like a little extra fun bonus at the end. Don't forget that I'll show, that we'll do at the end. But I think we were going to focus in today on kind of.
Wait, before we jump into today's focus, can I just share one thing, since it's not going to be any of those topics?
Yeah.
Is that cool?
Yeah.
So I was driving the other day and there's a truck with a hand-painted sign saying demand a forensic audit with a phone number. And I'm like, oh, it's so like folksy in Santa Fe. And yes, I do want a forensic audit. So I call, they say someone's going to call me back. I realized today, after spending my morning with the YouTube fuckery, that I hadn't heard back. So I kind of had a bug up my ass about it. I called and they're like, oh, those were certified yesterday. And I'm like, by whom? You know, I want all the details. And the girl was getting like kind of huffy about it. So the accounting firm that did the audit.
What are we auditing? What?
We had elections here, governor, secretary of state, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
Blah. So the accounting firm that reps the governor and the secretary of state certified the election, and then the governor and the secretary of state and some judge certified that, and that's our election certification. So
it's a circle jerk of self-contained flatulence.
It is insane, and every paper here is controlled, and like, it's very frustrating.
Well, it's a good thing you don't care about elections or voting anymore.
It is such a good thing that I'm very
and you apparently forgot when you called.
Program, it's something there that's like, you know, local elections, I should at least lend my voice. It's a trap every time. Okay, that was it. For the public record, for the 4 people in New Mexico who are watching this, I just wanted us to know what's going on.
Okay. Well, I think the circle jerk of self-contained flatulence plays into what we're going to talk about sort of as the main topic today, which I'm not sure exactly, you sent me some podcasts that you wanted me to listen to, and I did listen to most of them. I finished one completely, and I got about 3/4 the way through the other one. And so we're talking like tangentially, I suppose, on a certain level about the effective altruism aspect of the FTX scandal through the lens of Whitney Webb. Would that be an accurate thing, an accurate way of describing what we're talking about here today?
Yes, but we were we were going to finally get into the Boy George thing.
Like, that's going to be an afterwards. We're going to do Cedars of Lebanon and Boy George, because for some reason in my head, they're actually connected. And I don't know if that makes any real sense or not, but in my head does this. My head groups things together that like seemingly don't make any logical sense. But most times when I follow it, there's like some layer there in terms of why my head wants to do that.
Well, you're extra multidimensional. So I think your real is real. It just takes a while for the other dimensions to like close the gap to grok you.
To catch up.
Yeah.
We are watching this. So like we watch mostly like these like really hard to understand science fiction or mind control-y television shows that are like psi opportunities, right? They're mostly psyops, but like within them, there's some threads you can pull. But sometimes like my head gets tired of like having my entertainment time also be about figuring things out, because I spend like my whole day trying to figure everything out. And so sometimes I want to watch something that you can pay attention to enough to know what's going on. But if you miss like one little detail about it, it's not like you're not going to understand the series for the whole thing, which some of these TV shows are like that. So we got into watching this short documentary series on Netflix called Chef's Table Pizza. And it was a 6-part series that documented 6 of the most successful pizza chefs in the world. And some of them were what your traditional idea of pizza was, and some were very, very avant-garde and exotic. But what makes it interesting is the story they tell about the person and how they came to do what they do, right?
Wolfgang Puck, one of them?
No. Okay. No. So then we discovered that this was an offshoot of a series that had been going on for several years on Netflix called Chef's Table. So we decided to go back to the beginning and watch from the beginning. So we've been watching this, the first season, which was from like 2012. And some of these people are real characters, right? But there was this chef we were watching last night named Massimo Bottura. He's from Modena in Italy. Right. And he's like super hyper and energetic and running around and like a million things all at once. And his wife, who's also sort of his business partner, talks about like, that's basically the dynamic of their relationship, is her like chasing him around and trying to keep up with him, and then translating like his chaos and his brilliance that comes across as chaos to most people into something like digestible. Right. But the series is really good, and like it's great food porn, but also like these are some interesting characters. Like I feel like it's entirely possible. Well, we know it with people like Anthony Bourdain and Rachel Ray and the ones who've been really famous. But my guess would be that just the same way, like you and I are not a famous athlete or celebrity, we were like part of the science experiment in like a different way, right? That some of these chefs that are lesser known to the general public, they're all pretty famous within chef circles, right? Like we're pretty famous in our circle. It's a very small circle. It's a circle jerk of self-contained flatulence, right? But there's some personalities and some characteristics here that I could see would be like vastly interesting for, to be studied, but wouldn't necessarily make the like right person to be completely puppeteered in front of the public, right? You might like some of these, even though like you're not as much of a foodie or whatever as I am. I think you'd like some of these characters. I think some of them have personality traits that like you would really appreciate.
I think they're difficult.
Well, some of them are difficult. Some of them are just like, that's just, I guess difficult would be one way to put it.
How would you put it?
Well, to me, like intriguing, right? And their mad brilliance comes along with a few challenging aspects that for some people would be unacceptable. And for others, they're just add to the amazing, like the fascination, right? So anyway, but yeah, highly recommend it to the whole crew. When you need a break from trying to make sense of things, you can just enjoy that there's another community out there that's full of misfit toys. Anywho, so yeah, so George, Cedars of Lebanon and Boy George will be in the Afterword segment, and we are going to talk about the aforementioned thing here today. So you sent these to me with the subject title "Watch" with a space between all the letters, so it felt very emphasis, like very important. So like,
oh, that wasn't the intention. I just thought it looked cute.
It did look like something Sadie would do, and it's like Sadie who you lapse into when you're like having your like you know like your sugar pie on or something like that, right? It was very Sadie.
Yeah, no, there was no stressed importance, but
okay. So, all right, but you brought it to me. So like, from what angle were you being like, this is important, we should talk about it? I know we have been saying we're going to talk about Whitney Webb for a little while, because I think she's a certainly interesting character that has emerged. I mean, we've been aware of her for a long time, but her profile has definitely elevated over the last 3 to 6 months in a pretty interesting way that I think deserves some analysis and some attention for her work. But also what she's talking about this week is the FTX scandal. And I actually think that what she's talking about there is most of her work is very good. I have questions, but she's bringing to light some things that even you and I hadn't thought of with this one. And so I appreciate it.
Totally. Yeah. Did you see that Laura's boyfriend had her on the show today?
Yeah, we were listening this morning. Laura walked out during the Rumble section, and so I didn't hear the end of it. But I actually thought it was like a very personal interview because he obviously didn't know too much about her. And so in the process of him getting to know her, I got to know her better. Like I feel like I have a better understanding of her after listening to her with Viva Fry than I do after listening to her with people from the regular from the conspiracy or like you know, that kind of realm, right? He's more like your sort of standard, like, I mean, I don't want to say Constitution person because he's a Canadian, but he's like, yeah, you know, basically like a Republican or a person who's more to the right-wing side, but does seem to believe in some degree of liberty for all and is willing to question, like he's been exposed to conspiracy for the first time through this whole thing with COVID and whatever, and he's willing to consider it, pretty open-minded. He seems nice. Yeah, like Laura wants us to have him on. Like I know Vivian can get him for us, so maybe we'll have Viva Fry on at some point.
Yeah, fun.
Yeah. I just like his hair. I think he's sexy.
He's super sexy.
Weird Jewish attorney sexy, but yes. Anyway. Okay. So yeah, so I was listening to that. And actually, like, I'm of many. Do we want to talk about this sort of scandal and her perspective on it first, and then move into the sort of Whitney Webb analysis, or do we want to start with the Whitney Webb analysis?
Either way, and I at some point I want to answer your question as to why it is that I wanted you to watch it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Answer it now.
Okay. So she wove in a lot of pieces. I thought the bringing in of Dustin Moskovitz was extremely important.
First person other than us or David that have talked about him.
100%. And then she brought in open philanthropy, which is funded by Gates. So that brings Gates into this.
Right. Well, open philanthropy is the Dustin Moskovitz outfit that is funded by Gates that writes the checks for the events and shit like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what I thought was really important is that she lays out the larger plot to have like an elite technocratic class lording over the plebes, and how all this has been strategized to create that, which is the exact same thing we've been covering with the Brett Heather alternative, this thing narrative. So I thought the parallels in that formula were especially pertinent to our ongoing conversation.
So I think we're talking about the same thing, but she's talking about a different layer of the cake. She's talking about like the top, like where the candles and the frosting and all the decorations, like that thing that sits on top that is funding all of the layers below, right? And these other layers that we generally cover, like their concern is just getting the most amount of people to go along with the thing.
Right.
And then layering down, there's like the next layer down is people who like don't really question reality, but like are not completely asleep. And the next layer is people who are mostly asleep, but question some reality. And then you have like, I am suspicious. And then you have like, COVID woke me up a little bit. And then you have like, I've been a conspiracy theorist for a long time, but it's either from a right or left perspective. And then you have like, you know, sort of deep conspiracy, but like misguided deep conspiracy. And then below that, you've got balls deep conspiracy. And then you have people who've been in conspiracy so long, they're tired of it. Now we're, you know, doing synchronistic, right? So there's all these different layers, and they have to have like an operation at each layer to so that if the one above it doesn't work, they've got something else in place that is just 1 degree less bullshit than the layer above it, but still mostly bullshit. Right. And what she's talking about are the more top layers, and you or I are dealing more with center down, center to the bottom of the cake. Right.
I can see that. And but as well, like she's really focused on money because that was her whole take.
Correct.
With Epstein in the book she wrote. So I feel like her lens of perception is always going to be the financial nonsense. Correct. Hence the perfect timing for her inquiry with the FTX thing. Correct.
Yeah. I think her angle is always more about financial crime, intelligence agency crime, and like to a certain extent, like things from an anti-imperialist perspective, right? And the other stuff, the only reason I think this interview this morning that with Viva Frei that I listened to, like I'm of many minds about Whitney, right? Like I have at least somewhere between 3 and 5 possible perspectives and opinions on her. And I kind of go back and forth between them. But this interview this morning, like kind of confirmed one of them to me, right? And that is the one that this is a person who is not by her nature a conspiracy theorist. She just doesn't like authoritative imperialist power. Like she's not really interested in like all the cuckoo woo-woo stuff, right? But she understands that some of the people she's speaking to do need to hear that. And so she's willing to graze over it, touch on it a little bit, but that isn't really her interest. And I think she has observed, but also just because of what her interests are, she sees that as like a place to get stuck in the weeds or lost or a waste of time on a certain level to go too far into that stuff. Now, people who that's the most important part to, they will say, well, that is her like avoiding the issue or covering for people or whatever. And I don't know if that's true, right? Like
she's a 3D investigative journalist.
She's a 3D investigative journalist who like is able to sort of see 4D and 5D, but is not that interested in it. Like she's kind of pragmatic, right? Like
she's extremely pragmatic.
Yeah. And she also like, this is the biggest question that I would ask that she sort of explained part of this, but he didn't do the follow-up question, which is how did you go from what was the thing that catalyzed the move from biology and religion major to being a journalist? The only thing I saw that connected the two was that she was translating academic papers when she was in Chile. Right. And so maybe whatever papers she was translating, she became interested in writing in a different way, or she discovered some topics that she thought in. So how one goes from managing a farm and having a degree in biology and religion to covering anti-imperialism and stuff like that for Mint Press News. I want to know what was the wake up moment that was like, I need to do this.
My guess is that it's corruption. Like I don't even see her as anti-imperialist. I see her as a scrupulous person who's rooting out injustice and crime. I mean, I obviously don't know her, and I'm probably not as familiar with her work as you are, but she seems, and it feels like, for me, it just feels very old-fashioned journalist. Like, she's got a beat, and her beat is full of fucking gold. So why would she get off that beat?
And that's a perfectly reasonable explanation. Yeah, that's a perfectly reasonable explanation.
And she also talked about her father and, you know, history, anthropology, whatnot. So I feel like that probably framed a lens of perception towards cultural structures, governance, something. I don't know. I'm guessing. I mean,
yeah. She did not say that I woke up after 9/11 or that the chemtrails bothered me. She didn't say any of the things that you usually hear from somebody who is coming from the alternative media, right?
If you're managing a farm in South America, I would guess it would be some like corrupt Monsanto, like chokehold that was going on.
That's entirely possible. She didn't say that, but that's possible, right? You know, like I think I first became aware of her like through like sort of the Derek Bros pipeline. Like I don't know that I was aware of her so much when she was just with Mint Press. Although she was with Mint Press, I think the first time he sort of interviewed her or talked about her. So my guess is, and this is just my guess, these aren't facts, is that what you're saying is right, and that she, by her nature, is more of a like left-leaning person, although she does not want herself or anyone else to be governed by authoritarianism, whether that's authoritarianism of government, of financial institutions, or of organized crime or intelligence agencies. But that some of the things that people in the alternative media community or like the conspiratorial part of that care about and believe, either she doesn't or don't resonate with her enough for her to investigate them, because that isn't her concern. Right. So that's kind of my like, and through that lens, I can like go, okay, like this, she does great work. I can accept this, right? Like I can go, she does great work, and we should be happy that a person who does this great work is getting the level of attention that she's getting, and yay, right? So from that angle, like, that's great.
Okay, I just heard this for the first time, because you said, and yay, and it immediately fragmented me and took me to Kanye. And I just felt the weaponization in that, of the posting of the fucking yay.
Yeah. Yay is one of my favorite. I love to type in yay in responses to things on text, and then do the emoji that has the hat and blowing the horn, like woohoo, right? Like I love that. Okay, so yeah, I'm not giving that to Kanye West. And at some point, maybe we want to mention that little shit show that happened the other day on the Tim Pool thing. But
oh my God.
Right. So that, now I know, like, there's also, like, for me, from the very beginning, almost like there's been a suspicion around her for me that I don't know if it's my own paranoia or a problem with me, or if this is my intuition picking up on something that's wrong, right? And some of that is that, like, other people have for quite a long time spoken and done research on the same topics that she is or has, and they have not gotten the level of attention that she's getting. And that there's more of a background to those people. Like, we can see, like, sort of where they're coming from, what their rise was, how they ended up researching what they did, where they're going, all that kind of stuff. And hers, she doesn't have that, right? And there's a lot of other people that have talked about these things that she talks about. Now, maybe their angle of focus was slightly different. So maybe she just found the right way. Maybe it was from observing those people, and like the fact that they did these tremendous exposés that ultimately no one other than the people who already cared ended up caring about. And she identified why that was and was able to, like, craft her style to sort of address that, whatever one may think of that. So that's certainly a possibility, right? But it's kind of,
who are you thinking of who's reporting on the same things, who's not getting as much attention?
So it depends on the topic. She reports on a lot of different topics, but certainly people like James Corbett, on some levels, people like Melissa Melton and Aaron Dykes, obviously Derek Bros. And, you know, in this case, with some of the things around certain aspects of the pedophilia, John Brisson. Now, John Brisson goes way more underground. So like, there was never going to be a day where John Brisson was being interviewed on Glenn Beck, right? Or on Paul Bet David, or some of these bigger, you know, like, it would not surprise me if she ends up on the Joe Rogan podcast, right? And so, or Lex Fridman or something like that, right? Maybe now not Lex Fridman. We're going to talk about that. But prior to this week, that wouldn't have surprised me. Right. So, you know, she could end up on Dave Rubin. She could end up, maybe not, because she wades into the Israel issue, right? On, you know, and so that eliminates her from some conversations. But you know, and then, you know, there's also there's also people who've gotten into like other geopolitical issues that she covered before. It's not like she's not horrendous to look at or anything like that, but it's not like she's some like super attractive person that's the selling point, or that she's super well spoken. She says and stuff, and, you know, a lot. So it's not like she's the most like clear, well spoken, authoritative type of voice, right? So what is it that is making her presentation of this gain the acceptance or the attention of a new layer? Or is it just that hers came at the right time? People are fucking over it after COVID and over it after the Ukraine thing and whatnot, and they're looking for answers that they weren't looking for before, and her work happens to be doing that at the right moment. She had good timing.
I just don't see her as being that famous, and maybe she just doesn't show up that much for me.
She was on the Glenn Beck podcast.
Well, I feel like she hit an artery right now. Like, her timing is impeccable. And I also think her diligence, like, Corbett writes about a lot of other things. Like, she's pretty much on the same, you know, like, she's really focused. So my sense is just her tenacity and the quality of her reporting and investigating. But maybe I'm naive and your spidey sense is picking up on something that I haven't tapped into.
Well, what you're saying is certainly possible. I've been following her for probably more years than you have. And so she has covered a variety of topics, but there's certain topics that she doesn't really get into. So she stays focused in like a certain area, kind of, right? Like, type of thing. And, you know, the other thing for me, and again, this might be an Emily problem, and I'm certainly willing to examine that. She has a writing style that I have identified with a couple of other people that I feel is like a weird, like, I don't have a term for it. Like, it's not like there's another person who writes articles on a completely different topic, but writes them in the same way. And I haven't read like her most recent articles, but for a while I was reading all her articles, like a couple of years back when I was living in LA, where like the articles are really, really long, and like the whole thing is laid out, and then it's almost like she repeats the whole thing again, right? Like, it's like almost like the article could be half as long because you already said all of that stuff. Right. And when I see that, and there's like one specific person I'm thinking of that does a completely different topic and holds a completely different space in alternative information. When I see that from that person, it feels like it's a form of like psychic driving, or like a demoralization or something like that like things are really bad, and I'm not just going to tell you once, I'm going to tell you twice, right? Or kind of thing. And for me, with that other person, it's like, I don't even want to read those articles. Now with hers, right? Like, I read them, but I noticed that same style. And I don't know if that is a personal style, if that is a style she was instructed in, or if I'm just wrong. And it just feels that way to me because like, I already know this stuff. So any repetition feels like more repetition than necessary for me, right? I don't know. But that was one of the first things that made me feel unease.
Okay, so I obviously don't know this other person that you're talking about, but one of the most prominent things to me about watching Whitney Webb is that she's clearly on some sort of spectrum. And I know plenty of people on the spectrum, one of the kind of telltale signs is this repetition of their ideas. So I wonder if this other woman who's writing you were reading was also spectrum.
It was a man. It was a man.
Okay, man. Because that's just my first thought is like, for me, that's such a prominent Whitney Webb characteristic is just like the unique way her brain is functioning, I guess.
In the beginning, when I was reading her articles, I was only reading her articles. I wasn't hearing podcasts or videos from her or anything at that time. So
but she might have that same, I don't think that would be different in writing.
No, but what I'm saying is I hadn't observed her behavior on screen yet. And once you see her interact with someone, then you can identify what you're talking about. But when you're just seeing it in writing and you don't have like a frame of reference from like looking at how the person socially interacts or how they process information while conversing about it or whatever, right? So that's certainly possible. And then, you know, so there's that, right? And then the other thing is like, this is a stupid thing, right? But like my mind does this. Maybe it's not stupid, right? The name Whitney Webb, right? Like there's a level of trust that comes when you hear Webb because of Gary Webb, if you're a truth-loving person. And there's a level of suspicion when you hear the name Webb because of George Webb, also, if you're a truth-loving and non-nonsense wanting person, right? And so the name Webb just elicits both ideas, right? And I don't know if it's her real name. She seems like somebody who may be interested in protecting her identity, but she also does reveal quite a bit about herself, including where she's gone to school. So like, I'm just saying the things that come up. I have not seen any part of her work that is incorrect. From what I can tell, the people who have criticized her for what they say is like leaving out details or not going further, even though that information is available. But I haven't seen like, and we should ask John Brisson about this sometime. Like he made when she was on the Paul Bet David podcast and started getting more attention, he made a 30-minute video where he was like calling her out. And it was funny. Like that night he was in my dream, that him screaming about Whitney Webb was in my dream. Like it was weird as part of like this very other like strange melange of dreams that I had. But I couldn't understand as a person, like I don't listen to all of his shows. So I don't know if this is an ongoing thread he's been covering. It wasn't clear to me exactly what the problem was from listening to him. He kept saying, what about so-and-so, Whitney? What about so-and-so? And I can't remember the name, but not telling me, the listener, like why not talking about so-and-so is a problem that invalidates the other things she says. It may be there, and it may be he just doesn't feel the need to say because people who've listened or whatever it is. So I have not seen from anybody who criticizes the content of her work, like the step-by-step layout of why this invalidates anything that she's saying. So that's a problem. Like in that sense, like that's a problem for me about people who criticize her, right? Like I feel like it's possible she's only going with things that she can definitely prove, or she's making the choice not to open up a part of the story that is going to be really salacious and get a lot of attention drawn on it and take attention away from her focus, which is fraud, financial crime, organized crime, intelligence agency, and government corruption, right? And so like, I understand someone's point that like, well, if you're going to tell the truth, what about the whole truth? And I understand, like, you know, we've been through the Pizzagate. I can't say it. We've been through, I'll have to bleep that out, right? We've already been through that scenario. And like, we saw what it did, and it made a mess, right? And I'm like, I don't want to ever say that like certain aspects of truth are unimportant or less important than others or whatever, right? But what happens sometimes with these like conspiracies that are served up on a platter to people who are waiting to digest them, right, is that something that is a huge crime that can be proven and that is affecting everything, right? It is part of the pie that also has some like more like hard to prove, salacious, like very seductive part of it, but ultimately like less, I don't want to say less important, but like the the ability to get enough people to care about that and something to really be done is far less than this other thing that then gets ignored because of how salacious. Like everyone always wants to hear about a sex scandal or a gay scandal more than they want to hear about someone who like did financial crime, right? And whatnot. And so, you know, I can see how somebody's choice to say, I'm not gonna like open up that part of this because A, I'm not sure I can prove it in a way that would actually result in like criminal charges and this person being made unable to do the financial crimes as well, right? So rather than like, they see it as a distraction then, whether it is or not, and then choose to focus on the part that like they feel is causing more damage in the world, or the part that they feel that they can prove, or that they could get the most amount of people to pay attention to. And then once the attention is on them for this, then they're no longer able to do that, or that may come out later. I'm not justifying or not justifying any of that, but that seems to me like that could explain some of the apparent omissions that people complain about.
Yeah, that all makes perfect sense, but it's odd to criticize people based on omissions. Like we can't talk about everything or cover everything. And she did address it in one of the interviews that I sent you. I think it might have been the Children's Health Defense Fund one, that plenty of people are covering the other. Like if we're talking about Epstein specifically, she's like, that part is getting so much press. This part isn't really getting any. So that would make sense. But everything you said, you know, I don't know as much as John Brissom or all these things, but it's weird when people. Anyway, I feel complete.
Yeah. Okay. So yes. So yes, there are like, I think she only covered the sexual aspect of the Jeffrey Epstein scandal because she knew that in order to get people to pay attention to the other part, she was going to have to give them some of that. I don't think she actually is really that interested in that. And she's right. Plenty of other people covered it. But she understood that like that's what people are going to expect if you're writing a book about Jeffrey Epstein. And if you leave that out, then not as many people are necessarily going to buy the book. Whereas if you make that the second in the thing, and to understand it, you have to know what's in the first. And the first covers all the stuff that is her main point, right? I think in her perfect world, she wouldn't even had to write volumes. Right. Yeah. Right. So, but if in the second you're referring back to the first, then people who really want to know the details about the salacious stuff are going to go read it, and then they're going to learn something, right? So yeah, I think that's right. Like that she says over and over, and I agree with her, that people get seduced into the salacious stuff about Epstein, and most people don't know that he has decades of financial crime that were at play long before he really became any kind of prominent quote unquote predator, at least in the way that we think of it. Right. So I think that, well, there's a couple of things here, right? So like Jeffrey Epstein, getting people to focus on Jeffrey Epstein as the center of the pedophilia problem in reality is a distraction, right? Like it's because they want to do a Larry Nassar. They want to say, well, once we're rid of Jeffrey Epstein, see, we don't let pedophile crimes go unpunished, right? Like in the gymnastics case, which I know more about, right, the culture of it than whatever goes on with the government and the, you know, corporate corruptions. Like pedophilia is a rampant problem in gyms all over the country, and my guess would be all over the world. But I know just during the period of time that you and I were young gymnasts in Southern California, I can think of like 3 or 4 or 5 coaches that you and I saw on the floor at competitions in our area on regular basis who are now either in jail or banned from ever coaching again, right? So it is a prolific problem, right? And just right. And the same thing goes for, you know, sexual blackmail in government and corporations and intelligence agencies and stuff like that. It is system wide. It is not just this small little pocket. So I don't know, like, I'm not 100% certain if the criticism of how she covers the sex crime aspect of this is only in relation to the Jeffrey Epstein case per se, or if it's an anger about not covering other cases that are less well known but more wide reaching, right? Kind of thing. or other aspects of like the network that is connected to the Epstein network, but not quite the thing. Right. So I'm not sure so much about that. Right. Like, I'm not sure. I would love for someone to explain to me like what the real, like what their real beef is in a way that they can explain it to me from A to Z. So I can either go, that makes sense. And yes, I either agree or don't agree, or no, that doesn't make sense. And therefore I don't, there's not even things to talk about.
Right. Beef with whom?
Beef with Whitney about how she covers this stuff.
So I noticed that I've like taken the position of defending Whitney Webb, which is I'm actually neutral, but again, my sense, and I might be projecting just so much onto her, is that it's a way to get the public to pay attention to Jeffrey Epstein, to open the window to uncover all of the collusion and the weave of how the world works. That's what I would be doing. Like I said, the whole range of possibilities exist. And I recognize that there was a time in my life when I was naive and I believed nonsense. And then there was a time in my life where I was paranoid and I didn't believe anyone about everything. And I'm on I had the full pendulum swing from one side to the other. And now I'm vacillating more around sort of a middle, which is not synthesis. It's just like, okay, I know at this point that when I'm overly paranoid, I end up pushing away good opportunities, good people, real information. And so I need to find that balance between like enough paranoia to not be naive, but like enough sort of like, I don't want to say naivety, but like not being so jaded that I can't also like enjoy life and have good things happen. And sometimes I feel like people particularly in certain parts of the alternative and the conspiracy movement get to the point where like no one can help and there can never be anything good done because like everybody at least has like a wrinkle in their underwear that might one day be exposed. Right. And, while I understand, like, I don't think we should look at anybody as like a savior, or John calls like so-and-so is not our girl or not our guy. We shouldn't have an our girl or an our guy. We should be looking at the work and at the current thing, the thing that they're doing and how is that playing out in the world. Like, I don't think we should become dependent or attached to somebody to like do our thinking for us or any of that kind of stuff. But it's entirely possible that a person could do really great work and be right about a lot of things and either just be wrong about one thing because they got it wrong. We all get shit wrong. Or like something about other factors in their life explain why they see things this way. And it isn't an act of like being paid or being an agent or covering something up or whatever. Like they may see the world differently, right? Like a person who like believes in intelligent design is going to cover things differently on certain topics than a person who believes in like Darwinian evolution. Right. And that doesn't mean that like they're covering for somebody or that they're like an agent of some corrupt system. It might mean that they're smart or stupid, depending on right. So I just don't know. Like, I appreciate that she does a really good job of connecting the dots on some things that like other people either haven't been diligent enough to document in the way that she has, right? Or if they they didn't explain them as well. Like, her articles and podcast appearances, like you could show them to a person who is not balls deep in conspiracy like we are, and they're going to be like, that sounds bad. I don't like that. I'm going to look into it, in a way that if you hand them a round Foodgate article, they're just going to be like, you're batshit. Right. So like, I understand all the different levels of it. And some of the things that I've listened to with her recently have been very good, and including the way she's covering this FTX scandal. So if we don't have any more questions about Whitney, the person, and I'm completely open on her, I would love to have a discussion with her at some time. Right. Like, I feel like we could actually have a really good one. And I'm open to the idea that like my mind has been poisoned to people by my own suspicion of like, this, being like, this is too good to be true that someone is right. We don't want to create a scenario where we can never break through. Right.
It's almost like that's what people are saying is like, okay, like we have to have success in order to defeat the New World Order. But if anyone breaks through and has the opportunity of success in defeating the New World Order, we should also be suspicious of that. Like both things can't be true.
Right.
I mean, they can be, but we can't be like rooting for both, right? Like, I don't know. Anyway, okay. So on to the topic, her topic at hand for this week of coverage anyway. She's kind of like taken a break or a pause for a few days on focusing mostly on Epstein and that whole network and shifted to the FTX, MacAskill, EA, weird fucking whatever the hell's going on. So, but you talked about it a little bit in terms of that she's been exposing Dustin Moskovitz, but she's also talking a lot about this Sam Bankman-Fried and his unlikely rise to whatever the fuck it is he's doing. But the most important part, like, do you know what the most important connection is between
She's also talking about Sam's connection to Elon Musk, which is timely.
Sam?
Wasn't it Sam Bankman-Fried who was
Oh, yeah, Sam Bankman-Fried. I was just calling him Bankman-Fried. I forget his name is Sam. But there, you have, like, most importantly first, like, do you know what the most important connection between Moskowitz and Bankman-Fried is?
No.
Like, I'm going to show you. Like, this is like, I mean, this kind of explains it right here. So we've got the Moskovitz, right? And the Bankman-Fried.
Rogan?
Well, why? Like they have this. What is with the fro, right? They have the same hairdresser.
Isn't it interesting that they have these like over the top caricature Jew fros right at the same time that they're amping up the Jew narrative?
Right. So if you're critic, because they know whatever the system is knows that these two are not going to be able to hide anymore. Dustin Moskovitz has done a good job of hiding. Apparently he could hide. Apparently David Martin's exposés were not good enough to get the public noticing him, but we'll see if Whitney Webb is able to get to get this out there. Apparently, according to David, Dustin pays to make sure that he doesn't show up in the kind of Google searches that David's exposés would cause people to go looking for, right? Sam Bankman-Fried is also like, that ship has sailed. Everyone knows who he is. But look at the hair, right? And then even the other person, I want to see that they're talking about here. What was his name? What's the MacAskill names guy?
I don't remember.
Who MacAskill? MacAskill, EA. William MacAskill, right? So William MacAskill. I just want to see if there's any images of him. I want to see what he is looking like. Okay, so he is not of the same hairdo, but he's kind of the same ilk in terms of like dorky computer nerd kind of thing. Huh?
He's also a goy.
So, well, apparently that's the point is that he's, no. So this is what I'm did you see Whitney on? So one of the things you sent me, she was saying that he uses the name MacAskill, which is the name of his ex-wife's maternal grandmother.
Right.
Cover where he really comes from. On the one I listened to today, they revealed that his real last name is Crouch. Now, I don't know what kind of last name Crouch is. William Crouch. Let's see if there's anything.
It's German?
So Crouch, there's like some army person that pops up. Let's go William Crouch MacAskill. Let's see if there's how good of a job or not they've done at covering that. William Crouch MacAskill. Okay, so you do find him when you go to William Crouch MacAskill.
How are you spelling Crouch?
Crouch. They're saying he grew up in Glasgow, right? So I don't know if they're trying to hide a connection. Like the way she said it made me initially think that they were trying to hide a Jewish or an Israeli connection, right? But now when I look at him, I'm like, well, I don't know.
I don't think that's like an English dude.
So I'm wondering then if he's somehow connected to the royal family.
Well, there's a Crouch that emigrated that like colonized America from the get-go.
Who's that?
So William Crouch genealogy 1623, 1678. I wonder if that's what he's hiding. Well, I wonder if it was part of the whole like Templar heading over.
It could be. So whatever it is, she referred. So he's hiding his name. He has an ex-wife's maternal grandmother's last name to hide something about his. I mean, like his original last name, which is Crouch, right?
Yep.
Which, okay, so it's a weird last name, but it's not like you wouldn't. It's not like his last name is like Rothschild or Rockefeller, where you would immediately become suspicious, right?
Right.
So, so I don't know what's going on with that. Like that's people never ask her the follow-up question. I haven't gotten far enough into, I'm an hour and like 10 or 15 minutes into the one from her Unlimited Hangout. And she's already mentioned that it's a cover name, but no one's asked her, or they haven't gotten into exactly why he might be hiding his identity.
Right.
But it's crazy to me, the similarities between, Bankman-Fried and Moskovitz in terms of appearance,
Right.
and in terms of what they do. And that this obsession with, remember when we looked into Moskovitz and we found the stuff from like Burning Man, right? Like maybe I did that with Michael or with David, but
Yeah.
like he was like, he went to Burning Man and that's where he got this inspiration for all of this philanthropy and shit that he is doing. Right. That was.
She does talk about how much drugs had to do with this whole FTX thing, and that they were like,
Oh, I didn't hear that part.
oh yeah, that might have been towards the end, but that there was a lot of like maybe meth, some sort of speedy thing that played a very big part in the FTX ridiculousness.
Okay, Laura just found something here. William Crouch argues that men should consider changing their last names when they get married. He and his ex-wife changed their last name to MacAskill. Her maternal grandmother's name. MacAskill and his former wife authored articles together on topics of ethical debate. Okay, so he's like making up a story about why, right? He's trying to make it seem like it's part of his effective. Oh yeah, right, kind of thing. So did you never saw this article that Dustin Moskovitz wrote about Burning Man?
No.
Okay, so I talked about this both with Michael and with David Martin, right? So radical inclusion versus radical self-reliance. And he was basically talking about that feeling like should people like him who helicopter into Burning Man and have everyone do everything for them there be subject to the rule of inclusion or the rule of radical self-reliance? And because he's not being self-reliant, therefore it's okay to exclude, right? He's basically saying, that he's arguing for why it's totally okay to like glamp your way through Burning Man, right, kind of thing. And that how, even though he, had his meals flown in or whatever it is kind of thing, or, he still had this meaningful experience that like led to his deciding that he needed to do something different with his, he was complaining about the animosity towards wealthy burners, right?
Wait, just because you're wealthy doesn't mean that you can't like
correct.
Participate equally and like live the ethos of Burning Man. Not every rich person is an asshole.
Correct. Right. And also, like, if you were really curious about the Burning Man experience, you'd be like, well, even though I can afford to like have everything done for me, like you can still have a super nice site that a wealthy person could afford, but you could set it up yourself. Right. Like you could just have that experience for something novel. Right.
Well, and also the exclusivity thing, like the injection of hierarchy at Burning Man is so offensive on so many levels. So if this dude's part of like VIP shit, ugh.
Okay, so I want to read this part to you because I thought this was important and connected to what we're talking about. Going into this year's burn, I thought I had learned everything there was to learn. I smugly read the Verge piece about startups invading Burning Man, knowing full well how unbalanced the perspective was. It includes a reference to Mark Zuckerberg helicoptering in to serve grilled cheeses. I'll go ahead and confirm the rumor since it's clearly out there now anyway. The implication in the article is that he paid into a turnkey experience, but I know he was a guest in the camp I built and no money changed hands. Along with its other inhabitants, he helped pitch his own tent. Woo!
He helped.
Right? He helped.
How many people does it take to pitch tents? Okay.
I might need someone to help me. I'm just saying. I wanted him to experience the city and to experience gifting because I thought it would make him grow as a person. So Dustin Moskovitz is advising Mark Zuckerberg's personal growth, right?
And the world's better off as a result.
And the world is better off as a result. I believe that's exactly what happened, right? However, marginally, he was already a pretty great person. I've seen this occur countless times. Burning Man is a direct contributor to Carrie's and my decision to start Good Ventures and to my Asana co-founder Justin's realization that all the companies in the world are really part of one project, right? I know many of the entrepreneur invaders, and without exception, they come back from their first year with a decreased interest in zero-sum competition and a deep appreciation of the fully connected and mutually supportive community. When I hear about anyone going for the first time, my immediate thought is that is so great for them. And when they are a person who has pooled power or capital around them, it is usually followed by that is so great for the world, right? So everything is wrong with this paragraph here, right? I mean, not the paragraph the way it was written. It's, but like just in terms of, right. But this sounds a lot like training camp for effective altruism, right? Which is, I think, in my opinion, this is the most important part. There's lots of people covering the financial scandal aspect of this, people from the regular financial world, people from the crypto world and whatever. But this effective altruism connection,
right?
And the way she talks about it in terms of she and this Michael Krieg from Liberty Blitzkrieg are really talking about the obsession with transhumanism and technocracy and whatever that this all connects to, right? And links into the Elon, what does she call it? The Elon Musk argument, right? That we must do these things, otherwise humans will become irrelevant. So he's saying, I'm doing all this nonsense to help the people or whatever. But the exposure of this effective altruism movement, which used to be called utilitarianism, that is headed by a gentleman who once argued for infanticide based on babies' preferences, right? Is the same thing as this, what he's talking about, Dustin Moskovitz in this article, right? Somehow, he created this, whatever, Sherlock biosciences and one project and open philanthropy after his Burning Man experience. So for me, and again, what I think is not the be all and end all of everything, but have you ever been to a party or ecstatic dance? And I know ecstatic dance is for people who are more accepting and open-minded than I am. But have you ever been to something and you just cannot understand that from the way someone's moving that you guys are listening to the same music, right? You're no matter how far I try to stretch my consciousness, I don't understand how they're getting that from that, right?
Right.
So for someone to go to something like Burning Man and the decision afterwards to be that I better fund Event 201 and play Pandemic and have Sherlock Biosciences and da-da-da-da-da, right? That's the experience I have when I'm at a party and somebody's doing something I don't understand in the music.
So what I thought of as you were saying that was, and it was interesting because I just texted you about Jamie Wheel yesterday, is who else was with them there? What drugs were they taking? Who gave them the drugs? Who made those drugs? And what was woven together? Do you know what I'm saying? My guess would be that Moskowitz and Zuckerberg's being pawns in some sort of larger, fill in the blank. 3-letter agency, SFI, right. Lifeboat, was Schmachtenberger there? Was,
who else was there?
Exactly. And part of this experience.
Yeah. So that was interesting.
Black magic is happening at Burning Man.
Yeah. How close was the FBI trailer? Because there is one at Burning Man, right? How close is the FBI? They asked for special circumstances to be created for them, and the Burning Man people said no, y'all can come, but we're not doing special things for you guys. But yeah, it's acknowledged that FBI has a presence there. So I'm curious how close their camps were, or if it's just one and the same. So, okay. So the other part that is like very interesting for our particular purposes, because the world revolves around our purposes, let's just face it.
Can I guess what it is?
Sure.
It's Lex.
Right. It's the revelations about Lex Fridman in this podcast. And she just, I haven't listened, I haven't heard the part, if they got into it in the second podcast I'm listening to, I haven't gotten there yet, but I heard it in the Children's Defense Fund one, that since you brought it to my attention, why don't you announce it?
I already forgot what it is.
That Lex Fridman had done an interview with William MacAskill, and after this scandal broke out, he deleted it. And when somebody asked, when Marty Bent, who's part of one of these podcasts, and I'll link to these podcasts for people in the description, who's part of this, and he also was recently, he was the next guest on Glenn Beck after Whitney Webb, right? And Marty Bent is like a crypto person, right? When he asked Lex Fridman why he deleted the interview with William MacAskill, Lex Fridman blocked him. So, I don't know if Lex Fridman has deleted a show before.
So suspicious to block. Like, why wouldn't you just ignore? Like, just you can just ignore it, but blocking, that's so odd.
Well, like generally,
fear.
Well, I have a couple of ideas here. So first of all, this exposes something pretty interesting about Lex. So I have not watched enough Lex podcasts to know if it's like the Joe Rogan thing where like half the podcasts disappeared at some point. I don't think he has a deal with Spotify or anything like that. So I would be curious to know if there are any other podcasts that got removed. What, if anyone else has questioned him on this or been blocked or anything like that. But there's something that is so sensitive here for him that he took this one down and he did not take down the Kanye West one. Right. So Kanye West did say all of the things he said about Jews on that podcast, and he left that one up. So it can't possibly be that there's something that MacAskill could have said in there that was like so egregious that it had to be taken down. Right. This has to be one of two things. Either he's embarrassed because he had someone who has turned out to be involved in a criminal scandal on the show and he didn't suss it out, or his AI didn't suss that out or whatever. And he just like, he feels like he's doing the best thing for humanity by like, I'm not going to admit I have right kind of thing.
Like
but
bringing Zuckerberg to Burning Man is also.
But then you say, I had a lapse in judgment, right? If you're going to, you either don't take it down, but you announce you had a lapse in judgment and apologize to your audience if you feel you need to. Or if you do take it down, you say the same thing. I'm taking it down because I don't want anyone to think that I condone anything that was said here. I now realize it was a scam for this. He didn't do either of those things. And then he blocked the person that questioned him on it. So that's one possibility. Or the other possibility is that, and this, when I was listening to this one that I was listening to today, so Sam Bankman-Fried was a physics major at MIT. I think isn't that where Lex went?
Of course, that was my first
MIT?
thought, was the MIT connection.
So what are his connections to this entire thing? To effective altruism, to funding through these various sources, how close of friends are they, what is going on, and he just doesn't want to be caught up in it all, right? Like maybe he doesn't even have any scandalous connection, he just knows these people, like maybe he doesn't have any financial ties with them or anything like that, but he just like doesn't want anything to do with it, and so he just did that.
I think he's the propaganda mouthpiece for their agenda. And this is too close. But
he's supposed to sell us on AI, transhumanism, and technocratic reality. Yeah.
Right. That's his job. And his job is to have these people on and give them a platform. It's the same. I feel like it was the same function that David Fuller was performing, but Lex is better at it.
Okay. Well, it's different, right? But this is not a good look, right? For someone. And the other thing he did recently, well, we know, like, he had a CIA agent on several weeks back, and recently he had
another one on.
He had an FBI agent on, the FBI agent who brought down the Silk Road.
Right.
Right. Now, people criticized him for that. And he's like, oh, I'll try and get Ross Ulbricht on, or like maybe his parents, right? But like this thing that we're going to let the authorities tell their story first, and then we're going to go to the humans and maybe see. Like this feels to me like, without addressing in the show that like I am going to, the immediate next episode will be with Ross Ulbricht or or any of that kind of stuff, right? Like this just willing to allow corrupt and authoritative agency, authoritarian, not authoritative. Someone can be honest and authoritative, right? Authoritarian agencies to get on there and muddy the waters first before you hear, the person who's on the other end of that's explanation. It just feels like the wrong order to me, but him thinking that that's the right order, right? And to have, the CIA agent he had on was, basically saying why surveillance is good and why wars on terror are good. And he didn't have too much pushback, or very next guest or guest right prior to it, somebody with the opposing opinion. Now he can do whatever he wants. It's his show, right? But we should be asking questions about what he's doing, which we are.
I'm
right?
kind of surprised that you're referencing Lex as though A, he's a bad actor, B, he's a human being. I hardly think that he thinks it's doing the right thing to have the authorities defending their authoritarian fascism on first. I think his function is to push that agenda.
Yeah. No. I think I'm just, I'm in agreement with you, right? But it is revealing that it's making more obvious that that's what it is. So when you have that in combination with, and there's a few recent shows, like I want to watch that one that was like 7 hours, that I think is the guy basically saying why we need technocracy. I'm not sure, but I have that suspicion that just the energy I got off of it. But if you read the comment section on his podcast, it's like the same fawning over him that is over the Weinsteins, right?
But I feel like those are bots. I feel like that's a system game thing.
Right. But they can't all be bots, but there are some people who are doing it because they're agreeing with the bots.
Correct.
Right. All the bots are doing it. So it can't be that many bots, but when
Brett and Heather first started, like you and I were tracking them very closely, and they had a leap from like 40 comments, 80 comments to like hundreds.
Thousands. Yeah.
Like kind of overnight. And all the same, like, you're so smart, we're so lucky to have you. So I really do think the vast majority of those are bots or a fix or something. I really don't think the majority is real.
All right. So are we done with the meat of that? And can we jump to the synchronistic part about the whole thing that happened?
We totally can. And I just want to emphasize, and maybe it'll be more clear when you finish the episode, but that she is laying out and commenting on the exact same formula that we see coming through the IDW folks. And I think that that's really important,
right?
That's being acknowledged in another realm from another.
It's like the financial arm of the same operation. The people with the IDW and with Santa Fe Institute and Lifeboat and all that stuff, they're seemingly like less concerned so much with like money, right? They're more about social change. And this is the other side of it. These are the like, but yes, it's all like, it's the same, it's the same template.
Yes, it's the same.
Just different set of details, and like it can look different because money is really different than social justice or whatever, but yeah. So, okay. So synchronistically, right after Danny told me this thing about Lex Fridman, he passed us on the trail. He passed us on the trail again. This is the second time I've seen him on the trail. He was running faster this time. So he's getting in good shape and going around and around just like I do. He does run really funny, but he was running fast enough this time. And he was like doing some move that looked like he was like warming up for some karate chop or something like that. Like I recognize he's probably more athletic than I perceived him to be the first time around, but he does run funny. I think he's flat-footed. Like he it just doesn't look graceful on the bottom half, but the way he was moving this time on the top half, it's like either he's gotten in much better shape or I don't know what was happening last time. Right. But he was doing some interesting, but this time he looked me right in the eye and he had this air of like a different level of arrogance or confidence than what I saw from him last time, which was very interesting. And he is significantly more famous now than last time. The last time I saw him was something like 8 months to a year ago.
I feel like this confirms your theory that he's a bot or an AI version, that there are many of him. I wonder if you were seeing a clone.
A clone, or if the other one was a fake one that was trying their feet out on the trail for the first time, and this is the real one, right? I don't know what's going on, right? But this was a completely different energy, which that was different. That was like interesting on another level. It wasn't like an energy I despised or anything like that, but it wasn't just like sweet, innocent little Lex. This was like, yeah, and what, right? Kind of Lex. But something really weird happened 30 to 40 feet after so we were walking and he was running, right? And he was coming this way and we were going that way. We passed this area that is right in front of the Hyatt Hotel. Like there's the Hyatt Hotel's pool, and then there's the trail, and then there's this dock where people get on these like interesting kind of boats that go around the river.
I'm wondering if that's where Ross and I got one of those interesting kind of boats and went around the river.
Okay, so maybe like here there's like these like things that are like these weird like donuts that have a steering wheel in the middle, and then there's like barges. No, the kayaks are not here. These are larger craft. Okay. So there, I see that there's, you know how sometimes you'll see like a prism, like a rainbow reflection on the ground from like some piece of glass or something, or just something's hitting something. So I see one of these on the trail, right? And I point to Laura, I'm like, oh, look, pretty. There's a prism or rainbow. I'm always captivated by a rainbow of fruit flavors, right? And then I look over to the right and there's another one at like a different angle. I'm like, look, there's another one. I'm like, well, wait a second. That one is painted on the ground. Okay. And we stopped because it looked so different. And we spent a couple of minutes trying to figure out if the second rainbow was a reflection or whether it was like somebody had spray painted it or chalked it on the ground there. And it got to the point that in order to tell, I had to get down on the ground and like move the pieces of sand and gravel around and see that the color wasn't moving with them to verify that it was actually a reflection, because it looked so real. And it was so symbolic of this scenario going on with Lex, right? That it's difficult to differentiate what is what. And it was literally, I mean, it was within seconds after he passed us, right? So I'm going to show you the pictures of these rainbows, okay? All right. All right, rainbow. Here we go. Okay. Let me open. All right. So this is the one. This was the initial rainbow that was just across the trail, right? We can see that that's a reflection, right? Yeah. You see things like that, you know, from the window or from like a CD in the car or whatever, right? Okay. So then the next thing I see on the ground is this, right? And this is like one was like at a horizontal and one was parallel, or like vertical and one was parallel or whatever. So this is the second one. Do you see how much darker and brighter it is? Yeah. Like it looks more like paint. It's hard. You can't tell if that one's a reflection, right? Looks like somebody could have spray painted that on the ground, right?
Or maybe just less sunlight for more contrast.
Well, ultimately, I think that that's what it was. But I've never seen two.
Microdose this day?
No.
Okay.
I've never seen. So this one was like, okay, here's if here's the wall separating the Hyatt pool from the trail. Yep. The painted one is just parallel to it. The reflected one is like this. That is not it up there. That's like a camera effect, the little one up there. Yep. Okay. So, okay. So then there's another, let me see if this one, like here's like another, I turned around and looked at it from the other angle, and this almost even more makes it look like it's painted on, right? See how it is? It looks like that rock is painted yellow.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Yeah.
So at this point, I'm like, what the fuck? I get down on the ground and start moving those pieces around. And it took me a few minutes to figure it out. Like, right? Okay. And then there's one more picture that I don't remember if this one reveals anything interesting or not, but I put it in the packet. Oh, yeah. So then I followed it up the wall, right? The one that was on the ground that was painted, that looked like it was painted. It wasn't painted. It was a reflection. But I ultimately, like, there was this little thing that covers like a water thing or an electric thing. And when I was able to follow it up the wall and see that this one was a reflection too, right? Then I was able to go, okay, I had moved the stuff around, but like it was confusing and disorienting.
Very saturated rainbow, I will say that.
Very saturated, right? Yeah. But those one, the one that is so bright, like it reminds me of like some, what did I do here? It reminds me, I lost my, there we go. Let's see if I'm gonna have to end my share to go back to it. It reminds me, reminded me of what is happening. It's like small and the wrong one. What is happening here? There we go. Right. It reminded me of like, remember like the way that they paint the lines on for the tennis court. Right. It was so perfectly straight and the color was so like, I was just like, this one part looked like paint to me. And that level of like, okay, at first, like the trying to parse it out reminded me of like what we're talking about here with what we laid down about Lex in the last episode. And the fact that it came just less than 30 seconds after he passed me felt very symbolic. Like this could be, and what we're watching in that show Peripheral now, with there being people who are projected onto the trail, like projected into the city view, right? And I talked about this last year when I started to suspect that not everybody I see out on the trail is a real person, because some of them run really funny. Like I had never seen people run like that. And then all of a sudden I saw people run like that. And sure, one can think, okay, it's vaccines or whatever. That's one, one possibility. But the other one is that, that not all of them are the people of the same kind. Maybe they're projections, maybe they're clones. I don't know, right? Like I recognize that there's a level that sounds batshit, but this is what the mind is doing, right? But that need, I was on the ground sorting out pieces of sand, trying to determine if what I was looking at was real or a reflection. I mean, not that a reflection isn't real, but you see what I'm saying, right? And that's the level I think we're getting to. When I look at those pictures on the thumbnails from Lex's show, those look like copies of those people. Yeah. Right. And the difference in his energy when he came by this time, I'm like, we really have to start asking ourselves a lot more questions about like, what is what in this world that we are living in.
Totally. Yeah. Questioning the humanity and humanness that we project onto others automatically.
Right. Or that we, and the other way as well. Right. And just, also how confusing this optical illusion was to me, like how much technology is hidden in optical illusion. And we should be really looking at that as well. Like, the camouflaging and cloaking and optical illusion and all that kind of stuff aren't things that we talk about near enough when we're discussing these things. Like, I think there's very easy tricks that like people like who work in costume design and set design and things like that probably would know about. Like, I know Gaetan probably could tell me about some of these things, but like, another friend of mine who had a deep experience talked about like how some of the portals operate in terms of like how camouflaged or not easily visible are you to be able to go through them and stuff like that. Right. So anywho, all that. And then the other thing that maybe we should just throw into this part, that thing I sent you, did I send it to you? That Graham Hancock was on, Joe Rogan, and he started talking about that DMT thing. Yeah. Right. So I'll include the clip to that here as well. But Graham Hancock was all excited about this study that's being done where people are getting DMT on an IV drip. So they're able to stay in the experience longer than just 15 minutes, right? They can stay in there for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours. And coincidentally, Jeff had told me about a similar thing earlier in the day, but from a different source. And
can I ask a question that might be silly?
Yeah, please. Sillier the better.
I'm not that familiar with Graham Hancock, a little bit, but I thought his whole thing was like archaeology and lost civilizations. Has he always been talking about DMT and
Yeah, there's
psychedelics?
always been psychedelics rolled into it because I think he figured out pretty early on that most of these ancient cultures he's so fond of have some sort of ritual or ceremonial use of psychedelics as part of them. And I think a lot of things that he proposes in terms of like what psychedelics can do make sense, right?
Yeah.
But he's all excited about this study. And the people doing this study are the Imperial College of London, who are the same fucking people who gave us the COVID model, like that, right? That why we had to do 2 weeks to start to slow the curve to, what is it, flatten the curve or whatever kind of thing, right? And there was no conversation about why it would be a problem that the same people exploring and mapping out hyperspace are the ones that locked us in our house for fucking 2 years.
Yeah, I also think it's interesting that they've set up this like and Q controlled op with Daniel Pinchbeck coming in. Like, isn't it on Netflix, this show that Hancock's getting all this attention about?
It's on Netflix, and it's like, it's very much in the template of Ancient Aliens and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so there's that piece, it's a Netflix thing. But then, as I shared with you yesterday, insert Pinchbeck coming in with the opposition, exactly the same script as Brett coming in with his lab leak, right? They're still like, these are the squeaky wheels that are still actually validating the op while playing the role of criticizing,
confusing the public as to where the controversy really is.
Exactly.
Right? What was, I couldn't really read it very well because you're so cute, the little videos and pictures you take of your screen and whatever. What was Daniel's criticism of Graham Hancock?
I couldn't even read it, honestly. Like I did read his criticism, and it's like, it was like when the Peanuts characters, the teachers or the adults just go, wah, wah, wah. My brain literally would not let it in, but I know it had something to do with climate crisis. I know it had something to do with like, it was like not giving human ingenuity enough credit for this thing that understand, like it honestly, it just didn't land.
And then Jamie Wheel came in to second Daniel Pinchbeck.
And Jamie Wheel came in to say, like, great job, I totally agree, and here's a link to this Atlantic article,
right,
further proves the point. Which to me, what I saw in that was like, oh, that's interesting, Pinchbeck is back playing the Brett Weinstein character, and then we have the Consilience Project ethical cult guy here to ratify it. Like, again, it's just so obvious.
With the mainstream media article as proof as to why the slightly questioning of reality thing is wrong. Yeah, it's very on brand, very on brand. Okay. All right. If you would like to hear us talk about Cedars of Lebanon, and which I know sound like, for people who haven't been tracking us for lots of time, like, huh? Cedars of Lebanon was a hospital, but apparently it's something else far more interesting as well. And we're going to get into that. And we're also going to talk about Boy George. So if you don't care about Cedars of Lebanon, maybe you're entertained by Boy George. I certainly am. We will see you on the other side. Links are below.
Bye.
Bye.